What you're about to hear is the story the Browns never wanted the world to know. Courtroom secrets, unsealed documents, and the family finally breaking its silence after years of buried truth. This isn't reality TV drama. This is real, raw, and explosive. And once you hear what happened inside that courtroom, you'll never see Kody Brown the same way again. The Brown family empire is standing on the edge of collapse, and the pressure building behind the scenes is reaching a level that no one could have predicted. Because what began as whispers among a few disillusioned adult children has now evolved into a full-scale coordinated movement that threatens to expose every secret, every contradiction, and every hidden truth that Kody Brown has spent over a decade trying to keep carefully contained beneath the polished surface of his public persona. And while fans have long speculated about tension within the sprawling, plural family, absolutely no one expected 13 of his estranged children to take steps toward joining forces for a massive, no-holds-barred, tell-all project that could permanently dismantle the narrative Kody has tried to sell for years to viewers, interviewers, and anyone willing to listen. Because this situation is no longer about one upset kid venting online or a single sibling speaking out impulsively in frustration. This is about 13 voices rising in unity, 13 personal histories overlapping and confirming one another, 13 adult children who lived through the emotional chaos, the favoritism, the shifting loyalties, and the years of broken promises that defined their upbringing behind the cameras and behind the scenes of Sister Wives. And according to insiders close to the sibling group, the seeds of this movement were planted quietly in the aftermath of Garrison Brown's tragic death, a moment of loss that forced the siblings to gather together after years of distance. And in those painful conversations, they discovered something shocking and horrifying. They had all been living parallel versions of the same painful experience, feeling abandoned, sidelined, or dismissed by the same father who has consistently portrayed himself as the misunderstood victim of rebellious, ungrateful children. And as Kody launched himself into what many fans have described as a frantic redemption tour, his children watched as he went from podcast to podcast, from interview to interview, repeating the exact same story that he was the one reaching out, the one doing the emotional labor, the one being rejected again and again by kids who supposedly refused to give him a chance. And while he seemed confident that the public would buy this version of events, what he failed to anticipate was that his own children had finally reached their breaking point. And that breaking point arrived with explosive force when Leon Brown shattered months of silence to call their father out publicly in a searing Instagram post that spread across the Sister Wives fandom like wildfire. And that moment was not an impulsive lapse of judgment, as some might assume. It was the crack in the dam that revealed the magnitude of everything these siblings have been holding in for years. And once that dam began to break, there was no stopping the flood of truth rising behind it, because Leon was not the only one with a story to tell. Audrey was not the only spouse ready to confirm the truth. And Peyton was not the only sibling who had already revealed he had not spoken to his father since Garrison died. Wenlyn had been exposing inconsistencies for years on her YouTube channel, and Mykelti, once considered a loyal defender of Kody, was now openly drawing boundaries stronger than anything she had ever expressed publicly. And so the siblings began talking, sharing experiences, comparing stories, and realizing that the pattern was undeniable, that each of them had endured their own version of the same emotional abandonment, and that Kody had been counting on their silence to uphold his fragile public narrative. Because for years, they had chosen privacy, they had chosen restraint, they had chosen to avoid adding fuel to the fire of public drama, even when their father publicly blamed them for the fractures in the family, even when he exaggerated or twisted events to make himself appear noble, misunderstood, or victimized. They protected him in silence. But that silence has now evaporated, and in its place is something far stronger, a unified determination to speak the truth openly and collectively. And while Cody may believe that continuing to repeat the narrative of being rejected by his adult children will somehow preserve what is left of his reputation, he is deeply miscalculating. Because what he does not seem to fully grasp is that the numbers alone tell a story so damning that it requires no embellishment to shock the public. Because Cody Brown is the father of 18 children, and 13 of them are estranged. This is not a small percentage. This is not a coincidence. And this is not the result of rebellious teenagers going through a phase. This is a pattern so overwhelming that it exposes the truth more clearly than any interview could. And when you break down the identities of those 13 estranged children, things become even more devastating for Cody. Because from Christine's side, every single child, Aspen, Mykelti, Peyton, Gwendolyn, Isabel, and Truly, has distanced themselves or spoken out publicly with criticism. From Janelle's side, Logan, Madison, Hunter, Garrison, Gabriel, and Savannah, almost all are estranged and have shared deeply painful experiences that indicate long-term emotional distance and disconnection. And from Mary's side, Leon has now become one of the strongest and most vocal critics, calling out lie after lie with the kind of raw honesty that leaves no room for misinterpretation. And that leaves exactly 5 children who remain in Cody's life. And in a twist that reveals the full complexity of the situation, 3 of those 5 are not biologically his. They are Robin's children from her first marriage, who he adopted: Dayton, Aurora, and Brianna. And the only biological children he still has relationships with are the 2 youngest, Ariella and Solomon, who are still minors living under his roof. Meaning the only reason he has any daily relationship with them is because they legally and developmentally cannot leave. And that reality strikes at the heart of this family fracture, because when almost every adult biological child has walked away, it becomes painfully clear that the problem is not them, and it never has been. And now, with 13 voices possibly preparing to speak together publicly, the potential for revelations, financial, emotional, interpersonal, and deeply personal, has never been higher. Because these children did not simply exist on the edges of the family, they lived inside its core. They experienced how resources flowed, which households went without, which promises were broken, why certain decisions were made, and how drastically Cody's priorities shifted once Robin entered the family dynamic. They witnessed events that never aired on television. They heard conversations that cameras never caught. They lived the reality behind the storyline. And what they know has the power to unravel the entire facade Cody has been selling for more than a decade. And perhaps what is most haunting for fans and devastating for the siblings is the role that Garrison Brown's death played in exposing the depth of Cody's disconnection from his children. Because that tragedy did not just bring heartbreak, it brought clarity, painful clarity. And the siblings who gathered at his funeral saw in real time the differences in how their father treated them, who he acknowledged, who he ignored, who he comforted, and who he dismissed. And that moment, according to multiple siblings, was the final straw. The confirmation that they had all individually suspected for years that he was not going to change, that he was not going to take accountability, and that he was not capable of showing up for them even during the most horrific moment a family can endure. And so the conversations intensified, the unity strengthened, and the possibility of a major tell-all grew into something real, something coordinated, something that could reveal more than viewers ever imagined about favoritism, financial inequality, emotional manipulation, and the true collapse of the Brown family long before it appeared on television. And as Mike Kelty, a former peacemaker, shifted dramatically into someone who now demands collective healing rather than individual connection, the message became unmistakable. If Cody wants a relationship with one of us, he must seek a relationship with all of us. And it is this united front, this shared pain, this collective awakening that now threatens to expose everything Cody and Robin have tried to hide, because the children hold the truth. They always have. And now, for the first time, they might be ready to share it with the world. As the night deepened around the courthouse, the tension only grew heavier as every camera pointed toward the family members who stood frozen in the cold air, unsure of what the next hour would bring. And even though they tried to stay strong, it was clear their hearts were fracturing under the weight of everything revealed inside that courtroom earlier that day. And while Cody paced back and forth, his mind spiraling with worry, anger, and disbelief, Robin sat silently, her eyes glossy as if she were replaying every decision she had ever made and wondering which one exactly had led them to this point. The attorneys had warned them that the unsealing of the documents would trigger a storm unlike anything they had faced before, but none of them truly understood what that meant until the moment the judge read aloud the testimonies written by the children, the siblings, and the relatives whose voices echoed with pain, frustration, and truth. And now those words hung over them heavier than any verdict yet to come. Mary stood further back, her arms crossed tightly as if she were trying to hold herself together from the inside. Because for her, the unraveling of the family was not a sudden catastrophe, but a slow burn she had witnessed for years. And tonight, it all erupted into an undeniable reality. She looked at Cody hoping to see remorse, regret, or even acknowledgement. But instead, what she saw was a man fighting to defend an image that had been shattered beyond repair. Inside the courthouse, cameras caught every micro-expression, every ounce of discomfort, every flicker of panic. And the public was already dissecting each moment online, adding fuel to a fire already out of control. While reporters outside eagerly pushed forward, hoping to get a statement from anyone willing to talk, Janelle finally stepped out from behind the crowd, her voice low but steady as she said, "This was never about tearing anyone down. It was about truth and healing. And the children deserve honesty, not carefully crafted stories." Her words cut through the chaos with a clarity that made even the reporters fall silent for a second. But that silence did not last long, because moments later, the screens on their phones lit up with a new leak from inside the courthouse. A sworn statement from one of the older children, revealing a timeline that contradicted everything Cody had claimed publicly and privately. Robin gasped when she read it, her hand covering her mouth as if trying to hold back the shock, while Cody snatched the phone, trying to read the details himself, as if the simple act of hearing it with his own eyes would somehow make it less real. But nothing could soften the impact of the truth laid bare. The courthouse lights flickered as officers prepared to escort everyone out before crowds grew too large and too difficult to control. And the cold wind pushed against the family as if urging them to face the consequences that had been building for years. The siblings gathered near the steps, forming a small circle, discussing quietly what they would do next.